How's it going, everyone, and welcome into the second weekly mock draft here on the SFS channel. Today we've got a lot to talk about, from the Cam Akers injury, with him being likely out for the season, to the Michael Thomas news that he might not be joining us for the beginning of the year, all the way to Deandre Hopkins causing some stir about the new COVID rules in the NFL. So we're going to get to all that and more in today's video. Make sure you head down and give this video a like before we get started today. Let's keep this short, sweet, and get right to the point. Hit the intro, and let's get into the mock draft. Alrighty, here we go, everybody. We are jumping right into the mock draft with Jokester up on the clock. McCaffrey flies right off the board there. A quick pick from him. You see, we've only got 4 spots open in today's mock draft. We're filling this thing up, getting more people in here every week. The Discord's popping off. We've got a lot of people joining that. So if you haven't done so yet, the absolutely free link to join that SFS community Discord, get involved in the conversation, talk fantasy, sports, anything. I love to hear it all from you guys. Hop down, join that. The link is in the description of this video, as you can see up on your screen right now. But of course, we've got to get to the important details here in today's video. So the thing I got to touch on here, obviously, if you're looking at the roster that's up on my screen, is I've already got Cam Akers on my team. Basically, I just want to share this with you guys before it comes to my pick. I've already went ahead and quote-unquote drafted him. I set him as my draft pick in the 16th round. We're only going to be going to 15 spots in today's video, but I wanted to make sure that Sleeper's ADP, since we don't have a full lobby, didn't whiff and end up, because his ADP has been falling, but obviously the data can't change overnight, so it's been falling. It was only down to about 19 or 20, whereas it was about 12 at the time of the injury. So you're looking at a player who is going to get auto-picked by probably Team 9 or Team 7 here in the second round. So we didn't want that to happen. Again, we're only doing 15 rounds. So this 16th round here is basically a blank. It's a dud. You see him there in my lineup, in my roster, but disregard that. It's essentially irrelevant information at this point. So Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook off the board at the first 2 spots. That's exactly how I would do things here. Get the top 2 running backs off the board right away. Don't waste any time. Don't try and be cute. Don't try and make a pretty draft pick. The running back position should be the first 5 picks off the board, from McCaffrey to Cook, Kamara, Derrick Henry. And who knows if Saquon Barkley will stay as a top 5 ADP player. I obviously, if you've been sticking around here throughout the offseason, love the prospective idea of taking Saquon Barkley. And I actually just shared in my last video, or not my last video, but a couple videos back earlier on this week, however, that Saquon Barkley, I think, gains all the more value to fantasy players if his ADP keeps falling because of those comments he made about potentially not being ready for week 1 this season. I mean, I spoke on this in the league-winning running backs video. If you're talking to me about a running back who could be the RB1 producer the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, and I get him at the 12th overall draft spot from, having him fall down the board because of potential unavailability early on at the start of the year, that is just setting up that team at the back end for immense success when they're already getting 2 top 13 players in theory, if there is only 12 teams in the fantasy league, because you're getting the 12th overall pick in the first round and the first overall pick in that 13th overall selection in the second round. So you're just giving the teams farther down the board all the more chance to become contenders late in the season, because they're going to have the opportunity to jump out there and have an elite running back 1 overall performer on their roster. So as I just said, to make a short story long, basically, is what I did there. The more Saquon Barkley falls on the draft board based off of those comments and potential unavailability weeks, who knows, maybe it's 1 through 3, all the better for fantasy players, because you might struggle a bit early on in the season, but I think down the stretch your team is going to be really blossoming into full effect and putting up some really, really great numbers. So I always say, and I was a big advocate for this last season, and I talked about this a lot in my trade videos, which I do every week here during the regular season, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have the bell on so you never miss one of those. But I'm always looking to be a team that's just right in the mix all the way up until the playoffs. And this is obviously something that varies from league to league. Different leagues will have different playoff formats, different amounts of players allowed into the postseason. But if you've got a deeper playoff format setting and it's not as imperative that you go, 13-2 or however many weeks your team might play this season due to the new 17-game schedule. Typically in years past, the regular season ends around week 13, then you play a 3-round playoff to get to the championship game in those 12-team leagues. But whatever it might be, if we extend it out to maybe it's now week 14, you just want to be in the hunt. And if you can build the best team for the beginning of the fantasy playoffs, that's the ultimate goal here, and that's what we want to see out of our team. So I'm always constantly trying to make trades, trying to project long-term upside as opposed to making draft picks that are safe and floor picks right off the top of the board early on, because I think there's a lot more upside to be had. So the main reason I took the 112 draft spot, obviously I have not picked yet in today's video, and I'll assess the board here actually right now. As I said, we should be going 5 running backs straight off the board. That's exactly what happened here, so great job to, I know a couple of these teams auto-picked on accident. They weren't quite around on their computers at the exact start of the draft, but hopefully they join us later here. They still picked 6 running backs straight off the board, as a matter of fact. Tyreek Hill went to the computer at the 1.7. Not my favorite pick in the world, but Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, and Austin Eckler here go at the 110. So we're already starting to see some of that trickle down from the Cam Akers injury, and now it is my draft position. I have back-to-back picks here. The reason, again, that I picked this 112 spot is because this is the spot that we were looking at Cam Akers as pretty much a surefire pick within one of these 2 slots in 12-team leagues. So this is a full PPR mock draft. I should note that, and that will be factored into some people's draft choices here. But at the end of the day, Cam Akers was a borderline, he really was a fringe running back 1 with elite upside, and that's why he was going this early. Now, obviously, with an injury, no one is probably going to draft Cam Akers anymore. He'll probably fall undrafted except in deep leagues where someone might be looking to stash him away on their injured reserve in the off chance he comes back for a playoff run if he's able to recover exceptionally fast from that Achilles injury. So, I've got choices to make here. Who do I want to take? The running back crop, this has been a group so far that has been tuning in very closely to my videos, as I can see. 10 of the 11 picks off the board have all been running backs. So the position crop that I've got to work with here is extremely thin, and I just want to congratulate the guys here on, I think they made some really great choices. You might think Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones at the back end of the first round might be iffy and more favored to be early second round picks, especially in a full PPR league, but they've tied my hands behind my back here. I mean, what do I have to do? I'm completely reaching on a running back, in my opinion, by taking one here. And the chances are that once this pick comes back to me, they're going to snatch up so many of them within the next 24 picks that they've just completely bamboozled me. So props to you guys. Props to the Discord members, excuse me. You've outdone yourselves here and made some excellent draft choices. So they've tied my hands. I've got to do something that I would never do here on the channel. I'm a huge advocate for you got to hit running back at least once in the first 2 rounds, but I can't justify taking Joe Mixon at the 2.1 in a full PPR mock draft. So with that being said, I got myself my positional advantage at 1 spot at the very least by taking Travis Kelce off the board here. I'm going to take my next best wide receiver option, that being Stephon Diggs here at the 2.1. So again, this is the first mock draft in the history of the SFS channel. And part of this is if Cam Akers was on the board, 1,000%, I am taking that. I am drafting Cam Akers to be my RB1 for this team alongside Travis Kelce. Those two would have been a combo I felt really, really strongly about and would feel very good about entering into my 3rd and 4th draft pick off the board. But, I mean, at this point, what was going through my head, Joe Mixon was the next best running back based off of ADP. J.K. Dobbins was probably a player I liked better than him to begin with, as well as Antonio Gibson. But still not players in a full PPR league I know, or I'm not sure if I'm quite comfortable with doing so. So I get a player in Stephon Diggs to stack with Travis Kelce, who has the potential and the upside to be a wide receiver 1 overall. He could absolutely do that. He led the National Football League in receiving yardage last season, and he only had 7 touchdowns, I believe, to pair with that. So you're not looking at a Tyreek Hill who had 15 or a Davante Adams who had 18. By the way, Packers and Davante Adams have reportedly broken off contract extension talks, so a bit of a disaster going down for my Packers right now. It's a bit frustrating to watch that happen and play out. But when your wide receiver one and your quarterback are not getting along with the team very well, I think it might speak more to the culture of the team than it does to those two players, because Davante Adams has historically been one of the most humble wide receivers in the league. So I have all good things to say about him, and it frankly is making me look at my favorite team in a different way right now. So back to fantasy talk here. I can at least, rest my laurels on the fact that I've got two players with number one overall upside at their respective positions. And Stephon Diggs has a lot of room to improve in the touchdown department because, as I was alluding to there, those other two players had very inflated touchdown counts, and that's part of the reason why they finished ahead of Stephon Diggs in the overall fantasy rankings at the end of the season. And they're most likely to see regression, while Diggs might see progression in that statistical category. So I don't absolutely 100% hate the picks I made just yet. If I can get a Chris Carson, and this is part of the reason I don't want to do any live mock drafts just yet, because if they're tuning in to the episode while I am making my picks and talking you guys through which players I would like to see on my team with my next selection, oh man, they're not going to be there. They're going to be long gone. So you already see Antonio Gibson off the board. J.K. Dobbins goes there, the next player I would have liked to see. Chris Carson and David Montgomery. If I could get those two, I could at least not hate this draft so far. I mean, as I said, these guys are doing a great job, and the computer is actually making some solid picks as well for those spots that we don't have filled up. So back to what I was mentioning earlier on in the video about the free community Discord. That's how you get access to join the subscriber mock drafts. I make 2 mock draft videos every week, and each and every single member of that Discord chat is invited to join. I try and give you guys as much heads up as I can and give you as much information as to when I'll be recording as possible, but it doesn't always happen in the most timely light because I've got a fairly crammed schedule. But nonetheless, if you want to get involved in these, hop in that Discord. The link is down in the description of this video. And you'll be able to join these up for free and have communications and talk fantasy with me as well. So that's something you guys need to take advantage of. And boom, there goes Chris Carson, my top running back on the board. Ew. You're kidding. Okay. So I am feeling incredibly gross about this running back situation right now. This, my friends, is why we don't play the RB0 strategy in fantasy football. There is not a running back one prospect left on the table. This is crazy. I'm loving it. This is making me really evaluate the board right now. And whereas I usually have a pick I feel extremely comfortable making, they have completely gotten me out of my comfort zone here. So I've got to try and pivot, try and find some way to get out of this trap that I've fallen into, where I hate the running backs on the table for me. So I think at this point I have to just go out and pick one running back. And I think that player has to be Miles Sanders. But you have to understand when I say this, Miles Sanders has all the upside in the world, but he is also one of the riskiest picks at the running back position, especially if you're going to depend on him as your running back one at the position. So essentially here, I've got myself a player who definitely had his best weeks of the season when Jalen Hurts was under center for the Eagles. But I've also got a player who, in the midst of all the dysfunction in the Philly franchise, was a shell of himself. And he had some of the best runs of the year against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore, 70-plus yard carries, where he was popping off. I'm going to make a pick here so I don't make the rest of the members of the mock wait too long, because I can always talk about this on the way back. But, Carson Wentz kind of ate his value alive last season, and we saw incredible displays of talent from, obviously, Miles Sanders last season, but we also saw some pretty pitiful performances as well. So, my other thing I was thinking about, but it's a bit early, is I could take Kareem Hunt as just a solid PPR running back to a player who's going to be handling the receiving work out of the backfield for this team. That's something I might feel okay about. Another thought process that's going through my head right now is, do I just maximize my upside at each individual position outside of the running back spot? Because it's evident my team is going to be weak there. So do I draft a Kyler Murray or a Josh Allen here? And that would be my next consideration. I could get a Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs stack here, try and just be really good at wideout, tight end, in quarterback, and just hope that plays out in my favor. I'm really looking at a Raheem Mostert later down the board. I would love to capitalize on a Javonte Williams, maybe get my hands on one of the Tampa running backs. Michael Carter is probably and Trey Sermon are must targets down the board here. I got to find upside wherever I can because the positional group is getting pretty darn thin. Another thing I could do is I love Amari Cooper's upside, so I could take him here. But I think that the best situation and the best way for me to set myself apart at a position group is to take Josh Allen right now, which again, this has been kind of a trend that I'm not loving overly too much here. I haven't typically been a massive fan of early quarterback strategies. In particular, I hate drafting Patrick Mahomes because Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, to me, are interchangeable. It looks like, based off of the eye test on the board here, I'm getting him just under a round and a half later than Mahomes, which is excellent because I think that at the end of the day, Pat Mahomes doesn't really offer you much more aside than marginal consistency on a per-game floor basis than Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. Russell Wilson is the next tier down, so I'd say that's a bit of a more extreme scenario because he is wildly inconsistent the last 2 seasons. It's all boom or all bust for Russ, it seems like. But between those next 3 names I listed off, the Jacksons, the Murrays, the Allens, it's such a close call, and I think that they're all interchangeable with each other. And I would put Mahomes in that tier too. I don't think that they're very inseparable from each other. So we've now got an elite tight end, wide receiver 1, and quarterback 1 on this team. But the running back group is still pretty disappointing. And I'm at some point or another, I'm going to have to invest into it. I mean, this is a pretty darn rough group. And I never would have expected 10 running backs to be the first 10 of the first 11 draft choices to be running backs. And I think that's exactly how it should be. You're completely dragging that back end team through the water here. I mean, look at Trisk's there at the 111 draft spot. He got Aaron Jones and DK Metcalf. That's a really good upside combo right there. DK Metcalf could be the wide receiver 1 overall this year. There is a lot of wideouts you can say that about. That's why I don't advocate for picking wide receivers in the first round, because Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, and Stephon Diggs all have the potential. And I would argue Calvin Ridley down there at the 211 does as well. They all have the chance to be the wide receiver 1. So why would you want to pick that player with your first draft pick when we know for an absolute fact that probably only 3 to 5 at most running backs have that upside, and then after those players, it drops off a cliff. So you have to be all that much more conscious about the picks you're making at the running back position because it's such a much more thin group. And by passing on one of them, you're essentially opening the door for another team to find an advantage at that spot and to set themselves apart from you at that position. So, and that's exactly what they've done to me here. I mean, you look at the board, the 2 players I wanted at the running back spot, I was really, really hoping that I'd be able to pick Chris Carson and David Montgomery back-to-back at that 312 and 4-1 spot. Boom. Back-to-back right before my draft pick. Both are sniped off the table. And now I'm here trying to readjust mid-draft. And this is all the trouble. This Cam Akers injury has a bigger effect than you might think. In my lineup, it still says Cam Akers, but do not kid yourself. He ain't playing this year. So, you know, the running back position just got a whole lot more interesting for teams picking at the back end of the first round, because now the question begs, are we going to slide Najee Harris into that draft spot? I would personally argue that Antonio Gibson has business being drafted higher than Joe Mixon and DeAndre Swift this fantasy season. It is PPR and A-Dog 777 there with that 2.5 pick of Swift. I can't fault him at all in this mock draft because being full PPR and DeAndre Swift having such an intricate role in that passing game, especially when the Lions don't really have anyone else to throw the ball to, 100% justifiable in this situation. But in any other league, and I still think you could draft Antonio Gibson before Swift in a PPR league because of his receiving involvement. I would say in a standard league, I'd certainly, in a half PPR league, bump Gibson up my board there. I've actually got him as a fringe running back 1 in my draft guide rankings right now. So this ought to be interesting. Let's take a peek at the running back crop here. Just check out what names are still available, and it really looks like not much has been happening here. James Robinson, Myles Gaskin, Travis Etienne, not guys I'm too concerned about or even really that butthurt whatsoever. I actually am not at all because I really don't like any of those players. I have marginal interest in Myles Gaskin, but I would say that for the most part, his ADP is a bit high for my liking. I think there's definitely production value there, but I think that there's better value to be had later down the board that I try and stay clear of, so, or at least prior to that point. So Mike Davis is another really safe floor option that I could consider investing into here. There's absolutely zero chance that I think Mike Davis falls back to me in the next round. I think that there are particular players in this mock draft that would scoop him up in a heartbeat before I would get the chance to do so. So I'm going to make sure that here with this pick, I take at least one running back. I've got the choice to make. This is a PPR league, so receptions are ultra valuable. I would honestly feel better about taking a floor pick right now, considering the ceiling I have inserted into my lineup at other spots. Do I take a Kareem Hunt here and just expect him to be nothing more than a running back 2 for my lineup? We all know he has RB1 upside when Nick Chubb's out of the lineup, but we're not betting on one of the best running backs in the league to get hurt for a second season in a row. Or do I roll the dice here and this is a decision that a lot of people are going to have to make on draft day this year. Do you roll the dice, take a Javonte Williams, take a Mike Davis here, and just hope that they can be enough? My concern with taking Javonte this high is that, he's probably going to be my RB. Well, he will be my running back 2 taken off the board right here, but he will also be playing the role of my running back 3 or 4 until he wins the starting job. So, yes, I'm taking him this early, but he's not actually going to have that impact on my team for a while longer. So, I think that we fade that spot here for now, and I think my picks are actually going to be the next 2 players up on the ADP board. So I'm going to go Tyler Lockett here. I'll explain these picks in just a hot sec. So we're going to take Kareem Hunt and Tyler Lockett off the board just to keep things rolling here. Look, I went with the floor pick in Kareem Hunt there. I just want to have players that can hold down the position, because at this point, it's gotten so ugly that I'm just going to try and fill out the bare minimum and just hope that Miles Sanders is a hit this season. And then if Kareem Hunt just does his job, I'll be fine, because look at the upside I have on the rest of my board here. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett with that last pick there. I said this last video, this is back-to-back mock drafts picking Tyler Lockett here. He can go punch for punch in terms of upside with any fantasy wide receiver in the business right now. Him and Russell Wilson just have a chemistry and a connection that is on another level. And in the last mock draft, I don't mean to spoil it. If you haven't watched it, you should do so. But I stack Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett. And this is a theme that you're seeing now here in the last 2 videos. We stacked Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs today, getting 2 in back-to-back videos, 2 elite wide receiver and quarterback combos. But I think that Tyler Lockett was injured, and that played a big part in him being used as a decoy last year. When he was healthy, I mean, he had some of the biggest games there were. He had 15 receptions, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns against the Cardinals last year, and he had some other monster games as well. He's a darn good player, and he doesn't look like a big, physically imposing DK Metcalf, but his routes, his awareness, and again, just having that connection with his quarterback is so invaluable and so enabling for him to be such a productive pick. So running back, it has to be in the back of my mind here with each and every one of these selections. Chase Edmonds, I would not hate as a running back 3 for this team as it is full PPR. I'm in a normal situation. When I get the running backs I want early, I'm thinking about wide receivers right now. But since running back is still such a pressing issue, and it's going to be something you hear me talk about the rest of this draft probably, because I'm never really going to feel completely secure with my picks there, I'm going to have to assess that situation every single round. So, typically I load up on running backs through the first 4 rounds, and I don't pick them all in a row, because while I think that it becomes an issue when you pick too many receivers early for your running back production, I think that conversely, if you invest all into one positional group, it'll limit your upside elsewhere. Nonetheless, I at least like to take 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. Maybe in extreme circumstances, it turns into 3 of the first 4. Sometimes it's only 2 of the first 4. You get the point. But normally I walk away with more than 1 running back in the first 5 rounds, let alone 3, 4, or 5. So clearly a different approach in today's video. And there is another just gutting draft pick with Michael Carter going at the 7-1. He would have been an incredible steal in a PPR league. You talk about the receiving production out of the backfield, catching passes from Zach Wilson, the rookie out of BYU. That would have been such a good fantasy situation. And yes, he's the third stringer right now in New York, listed on the team's depth chart. But we know things aren't going to stay that way. We know that Tevin Coleman can't hold the job down, and LaMichael Pirine sure can't either. So it might be a bit of a committee-style system. Maybe everyone has their role in this offense. There's the potential Michael Carter doesn't see very much touchdown upside because LaMichael Pirine is the bruiser there. Tevin Coleman's a little bit more of a change of pace back, and I think Carter comes in and is the scat back, the receiving back, because he's a smaller, more shifty player. Here, I'll pull up his profile so you guys can see his heights and weights here. 5'10", 199. So not a total, scrub. That's not the right usage of words there. But you get the point. He's not tiny, but he is very, very not a bruising goal line back that's going to be featured in that area of the field. So he was kind of the salt to Javonte Williams-Pepper at North Carolina last season. Javonte Williams took college football by storm last year, proved that he's a 3-down back, and for that he got picked at the top of the second round. Denver traded up for him, and we missed out on him too, I believe, since that last draft pick has been made. I would feel really good here, and I would start to regain confidence in my running back crop if either Raheem Mostert or Ronald Jones fell to me at this spot. Both are quality running back twos, because then I can try and stack a Trey Sermon here. You see, I actually don't think I would be able to stack a Trey Sermon because I would have to reach over 20 picks to get him at that 8th round draft spot, and I know for a fact he is not getting past a variety of the people that we've got in today's mock draft. So there goes Raheem Mostert. So maybe now I don't feel as much pressure to stack the two players because obviously I can't. But I do still have a chance at Ronald Jones, who I think can be, again, a quality running back too. That Tampa Bay offense is going to be better than you think. And they might be better than you think through the first 3 quarters, passing the ball, that is. But when it's time to run the game out in the fourth quarter, when they've been trashing teams, they're going to be favored in every game this year almost. And geez, talk about Trey Sermon falling to me even at the 7-12. He gets snatched up at the 7-10 here. So we've got some heavy running back fever going on, and I can't blame them. I mean, that's where the juice is at right now, and they are making their picks worthwhile here. Please give me Rojo, man. Please give me Rojo. I need another running back. That Tampa Bay offense running out the fourth quarter is giving Rojo a very talented young player. He's hungry. He plays physical. He plays hard. It's the production you love to see. And there it is. We are going to, by the skin of our teeth, get Ronald Jones as our RB3. Now I at least don't feel terrible about this team. I'd be feeling much better if Cam Akers wasn't injured. And that was a real legitimate draft pick right there. But while that's not the discussion we're having, things are a bit more shaky. So the question now becomes, do I draft David Johnson here, which again would be considered a bit of a reach, but at this point I'm not all that against it. He's got receiving value. He will certainly, and that is a crowded backfield now. The Texans have signed a lot of vets this offseason. Do I go there, or do I just sit tight with that running back group? Nyheim Hines is a very valuable pick down here who is highly used in the receiving game with his team. Darrell Henderson is a name, actually, that, you know what, to be completely honest, the whole point of this mock draft was the post-Cam Akers injury, and then seemingly we all forgot about Darrell Henderson. So that's the easy pick right here. Why would I take Darrell Henderson after this? Darrell Henderson to the rescue, everybody. So what did we learn from today's mock draft? Well, more people need to do mock drafts because his ADP needs to be on the rise, and it needs to be on the rise now because no Cam Akers. That obviously means that he's the next man in line, and the Rams have to run the ball with somebody. I've talked about in the reaction video I did last week to Cam Akers going down, or I guess it's not really last week quite yet, but earlier on this past week, that Darrell Henderson is the clear-cut player to handle the work share that we expected Cam Akers to see. And I think something that's being tossed out there a bit right now that I don't so much agree with, and maybe Darrell Henderson isn't picked as a 2nd or 3rd round player like I initially expected him to, because when I dove deeper into the situational analysis here, I just don't think he has the same upside that Akers had, or the same floor for that matter. He has been dinged up in a variety of different instances throughout his young NFL career. He's only entering season 3 right now. And you can see I would have really liked to have a Robbie Anderson. I actually wanted to talk about him as a target monster that was on the board available for me there. Darrell Henderson is he's small. He's 5'8". He was used more as a receiving player at Memphis. He wasn't really a bruising 3-down workhorse back. But at this point, the Rams don't really have many other options. Xavier Jones is their third-string running back. Well, now their second-string running back. I'm very fortunate that in my Dynasty League where I had Cam Akers, I also made a trade this offseason to acquire Darrell Henderson from another team. So I was feeling I would have been devastated. I was devastated that Cam Akers went down, but I would have been even more so had there been no insurance policy in play. I've got Jonathan Taylor on that team as my RB1 to lead the way with Darrell Henderson at the 2. Actually, I've got Miles Sanders on that team as well. So I've got some high upside backs, but I should probably add a Nyheim Hines into the mix now to give me some more security with that JT pick there. But nonetheless, Henderson can be a quality running back too, like a Kareem Hunt, like a Ronald Jones. I don't think the sky's the limit for him. I really don't. I think that there are defined limitations to who he can be as a fantasy player. I think that he can be a very productive back. And again, with this being PPR, let's pull him up on the screen right here so you guys can take a look at what we're working with here. But there just isn't the same feeling to Darrell Henderson that I did with Cam Akers. Because with Cam Akers, I felt that the top of the defense could be blown off in any given play, and he could run it out for a score because of the explosive ability he had off tackle, because of his elusiveness in the open field. Wow. And just his overall strengths to be a complete running back in the league at such a young age. Henderson has a little bit more flaws. I wouldn't say he has an elite burst like a Cam Akers does. He is certainly not a bad player, and it sounds like I'm kind of trashing him right now. But the point I'm trying to get here is that maybe we are going to start overdrafting Darrell Henderson, and I think we should be really careful about doing so. And again, for the purpose of this video, obviously we were going to talk about the Cam Akers injury, but kind of unexpectedly expected here when the ADP, the news is so fresh, the next man up slips our minds. And although I was going into this video going to target him and I was never going to pick him up in, I would say, until the 3rd round of the draft board, he still fell later than he should have. So I would say that maybe the 4th round. Let's take a look at some other players on the board here, and I'll break down who I think should be and shouldn't be going before Darrell Henderson. And obviously my rankings are a little bit different than the ADP, so there are some players going before others that I think is kind of stupid based off of this draft board. For example, why are we taking Chris Carson and David Montgomery after Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Josh Jacobs? Like, had you slid Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Josh Jacobs back to the 310 and 311 and moved up Montgomery and Carson, I already would have known I was dead in the water at the running back spot. I already would have known that there was no floor value left for me to have, and it would have just been a fantasy nightmare. So, all right, Darrell Henderson here. I think it's legitimate to squeeze him into that 3rd round somewhere looking at the board right now. I think that taking him in the early 2nd, even the mid-2nd, is too much of a reach, because you talk about a Joe Mixon. He's had his injury histories. He's had his really down performances. He's had his high highs as well. But I think the floor is safer for Mixon. We have more proven production. There is no chance I am taking him before an Antonio Gibson, who's going all the way down to 210, not a J.K. Dobbins. I think fair territory for Darrell Henderson is in front of Josh Jacobs and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but behind Chris Carson and David Montgomery in my own personal rankings, that is. So you're looking at, let's do some quick math here, 6, 10 running backs in the 1st round, another 4, 14, 15, 16, 17, about my RB 18. So Darrell Henderson is a middle of the pack running back 2 for me the rest of this fantasy season. There you have it. That's average. I mean, the running back spot and really good RB2s are still highly valuable and can still give us great contribution on a week-to-week basis, but do not expect him to be Cam Akers when you draft him this season. I'm just going to put that out there because you're going to be disappointed if you're expecting that level of production from him. So we're feeling better now. You know, we've got ourselves Kareem Hunt, Miles Sanders, Darrell Henderson, Ronald Jones. It's certainly not a strength of this team, but I would say, well, it is the weakness, but it is not a glaring weakness any longer. And again, that would have to be adjusted. I probably would have ended up picking Darrell Henderson. It would have been a tough call between him and Miles Sanders at that 312 spot. Maybe I would have ended up taking Darrell Henderson, swapping those picks out, and then you look at the rest of this team. But that's not how it played out today, because the ADP hasn't adjusted itself. The fantasy community is still trying to determine where they want to take Darrell Henderson at. So that's all part of the process we got to work out here the rest of this offseason. Another thing that we got to look at is that Michael Thomas injury and where we think he's going to fall to on draft day, because it's certainly going to be different than where he's going right now. So I've got 15 seconds on the board, and I have not really thought about who I wanted to pick. I need more receivers. I really do. I think that the wise investment here might be Curtis Samuel or Corey Davis. I've picked a lot of Corey Davis in recent mocks, so I'll go with Curtis Samuel here so we can talk about a different name. I don't want to hear the Marquise Brown talk. I mean, Lamar Jackson and that offense don't pass the ball that much. 89 targets was enough for Mark Andrews to see 25% of the target share last season. Rashad Bateman could walk in here day one, take over as the number one in this offense, and there's just not enough value left for Marquise Brown to be taken ahead of these players. Curtis Samuel has, while it is one of the most hot and cold quarterbacks in NFL history, the highs and the ceiling that Ryan Fitzpatrick provides to his pass catchers are insane. And you're telling me that I can get Terry McLaurin as the number one in this offense to take the heavy coverage away from Curtis Samuel, who is a very darn good gadget player, a tool in the middle of that offense. 100% I'll take that. And this has been a team that from the start here, we've kind of had to play the upside card most of the time throughout the video. I mean, we just haven't had the opportunity to make very many comfortable draft choices here. That's okay. We're finding ways to pivot. We're finding ways to address different needs on the team. I still think that running back could be more deep. I still think that it could be a lot safer in the way that we invested into it, but it is what it is, and I think we're making do with what we've got here. So, again, this is all set up by that running back run, 10 of 11 picks there to start the board off. That had a big impact. So, I want to talk about the Michael Thomas injury before we get too much farther in this video, because as the action gets underway, I start to forget what we're talking about here, and we end up going all over the place. And I think that we still have good content going on. We're still having useful conversation. But, of course, you're all here to find that information. So there he is, Michael Thomas here. We'll pull him up on the screen. Actually, hang on. Let's just make sure that... And, of course, it is me on the clock, and I'm going to get auto-picked because I forgot I had back-to-back picks. Time's up. Boop. Rob Gronkowski. You know what? I've talked about Gronk before on the channel, and here we go. Mike Williams next up off the board there. I'm not a big advocator for taking two tight ends in a mock draft, but that is my fault. And again, we're just talking fantasy here. No pressure, and I need to turn off the auto pick so I don't get... there we go. Don't get auto picked here. But we're talking fantasy. We're just getting information out there, discussing the board and such. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm fine with that pick there. Rob Gronkowski, actually, if we take a peek at the other tight ends on the board, is a player who I think is just fine going at this spot. You know, there are players, and they're pretty much all the same at this place on the draft board. They are dicey, high upside plays. Irv Smith, Logan Thomas, Tyler Higbee, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram. I can give you a case why each one of those tight ends has legitimate tight end one, being top 12 tight ends in this type of a league format, why they have that type of upside in this type of a draft. But the thing that I think that those players don't give us that Gronk does, and I actually talked about this a couple of videos ago and in his draft guide profile, is that I think we know what we're getting from Gronkowski on a week-to-week basis. He catches a touchdown pass or he doesn't. It's as simple as that. And I found myself a streamer who, if something happens to Travis Kelce in the bye week, like, Gronk is not going to be a frequent starter for this lineup, but he is a player that I feel confident just throwing him out there and asking him to score me a touchdown. I mean, you've got the chemistry with your quarterback. He did it very well last season, and I had Gronk in a ton of leagues, and would do the same thing I'm talking about right now. Score me a touchdown, don't score me a touchdown. That's fine. I'm not living or dying by the tight end position. Typically, I would advise this draft pick to be made if you didn't invest so early into a tight end at the top of the board, because like I said, it's unlikely that Gronk ends up becoming a starter for this team ever outside of that bye week. But again, still a very good start, and I would feel more comfortable knowing what to expect on a per-game basis from him than I would with the rest of these options that you can see there. So, yeah, I mean, Irv Smith taking over for Kyle Rudolph as the tight end 1 in that offense, that sounds great on paper, but will he actually get the increased workload? Logan Thomas approaching his age 30 season here. Transitioned from quarterback to tight end, magically saw a 100-plus target season. Like, are we really expecting that to happen in back-to-back years? I don't know. A lot of questions to be answered with all these players, but again, Gronk has the least question marks of the bunch. So this time we're going to come prepared. We've got 13 picks. Well, actually, it is just 12, considering we are the 13th pick here. And I believe he said that he was busy, so this might just turn into an auto pick here. But we will either give him the chance to pick, or if he doesn't make his draft selection here, he will just go on auto draft for the next pick. So we will just discuss fantasy content until then. So we're going to come prepared for this next draft position. We're going to be scouting out our roster, making sure we have the right players available to make the picks that best help this team. Right now, I would say that we have a really strong starting lineup at every position outside of running back, which I would say is average. You pair Henderson with Sanders, interchange Kareem Hunt and Ronald Jones on a given week with either of those names. I think that Darrell Henderson, as long as he's healthy, becomes a staple and a starter in this offense. But that RB2 spot is kind of a revolving door because you're going to be looking at matchup plays here and just deciding who has the best potential to give you a nice ceiling on a week-to-week basis. Other than that, tight end, wide receiver 1, 2, and the quarterback spot, I feel excellent about. So we're just pretty much filling in depth at this point. Curtis Samuel, I feel good about a first receiver off the bench. If we want to take a look at other wideouts on the board right now, Nelson Aguilar, I like the idea of that pick. Russell Gage, I might not let that one pass me up here. And I think that Jokester actually made a pick, so that's good news there. He didn't miss out on his picks, I don't believe, because I don't think we talked for that long. But Michael Thomas, wow, before we get too off track, and of course, right when I get back on track, my pick is coming up, so it's likely that we're going to be all over the place talking about a different conversation in just a second here. But Michael Thomas is having, or had, surgery in June to clean up some ligaments in his ankle that kept him out the majority of last season. Obviously, the reason he had a stinker as a fantasy player last year and was very, very disappointing. So basically, what does that mean for us? Well, he might not be ready for the first week of the season, maybe even the first few. It's going to hold him out of games. Maybe he misses a month even. So, and I've even heard the first half of the season being tossed out there. I think that's extreme. I think that at that point, he should be falling way down the board. And dang, there goes Russell Gage. So all my boys are being snagged up off the board here. We've got some fearless drafters right now, not afraid to take my players. I feel like I got to just pull the trigger on my guy here. I think that I need to just pick. Man, I gotta do it. I just gotta take the best 2 wide receivers, in my opinion, on the board right now. At this spot, I think that is John Brown still out here? I mean, he is, but he's way down there, so I might be able to get him back on the bend and throw 2 darts at the board at the wideout spot for one team. I could go Indy too. I mean, they really need someone to step up here and just give them production in some fashion. I mean, Carson Wentz is a gunslinger, so they're going to get those deep balls back. Not a flashy pick. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I'm going to take T.Y. Hilton. You heard what I said there. He is the player that's going to stretch the field. Michael Pittman is due for a breakout. They actually quite need him to break out to be a productive player for that team. But like I said, Phil Rivers wasn't throwing the ball downfield last season much. T.Y. Hilton is old. He's getting up there in age. He's not the same player he once was, no longer in his prime. But I still think he has the potential and the opportunity to surprise us, score touchdowns, and stretch the field and get those big home run balls, which will result in fantasy production. So we're going to turn around after that. We're going to take another high upside receiver, Nelson Aguilar. I think this might play out better if Cam Newton gets benched. And the reasoning for that is I think that Mac Jones is the better downfield passer, more poised, more accurate, more under control. Cam is going to hit those balls. He's going to hit guys for big plays. We saw him do it on occasion last season, but it's going to come at a much more inconsistent rate, if you feel what I'm saying here, because he's not going to accurately have ball placement to again and again find the players where they need to be. He will overthrow players. He will underthrow players. He will throw it too hard at players. Like, Cam Newton has had really big struggles as a passer the last 3 seasons or so, maybe even more than that. He's still a dynamic rushing threat, still a top 32 quarterback in the National Football League, even better than that in fantasy. And I still think he should have a starting job on a team, but maybe he isn't the best situation for a deep threat. Nonetheless, is it too much to say that Cam Newton might have a couple ugly games to get benched here for Mac Jones? I mean, a lot of people are saying that we might not see Mac Jones this season, but I think we're all forgetting how bad Cam Newton was. He had 8 touchdown passes in 15 games started last year. 8. That's like half a touchdown pass. Just over half a touchdown pass on a per game basis. So, yes, he had rushing production. He had rushing touchdowns. Excellent. That's amazing. But that's not helping the receivers out any. So, I'm hoping he gets sat down. Mac comes in for this situation because I love Cam Newton. He's very fun to watch. But for fantasy, if you're taking Nelson Agholor, I think he has his highest upside and Nelson Aguilar's highest potential comes with Mac Jones as the quarterback on the field. So, let's see. Who went off the board at the wide receiver spot? Really, to my eye, it's telling me that there is still a chance to take John Brown here, which is something I think I might do. But back to the Michael Thomas deal. So, he went at the late third, the 3.9 draft position. So, late third round here. And again, to clean up the ligaments in the ankle, and I apologize, I've been all over the place in today's video, but it's been a long week. We're having ourselves a good time in today's mock draft. The important thing is we're out here. You guys are tuning in, soaking in fancy information. The picks aren't exactly flawless in today's video, and as you saw, the subscribers, the Discord members that have been hearing the closest feedback from me as a fantasy analyst perfectly emulated my draft strategy. The computer was the only person that drafted a receiver, and the rest of them went running back. Good job to the SFS community there, putting me in a really tough spot to start off today's video from the get-go. But, yeah, so we've talked about a lot of good stuff today, a lot of interesting topics and stuff to break down, but obviously, like I said multiple times in today's video, the point was to break down the Cam Akers injury and how that impacts the board, as well as the Michael Thomas injury and his impact on the board. And we haven't even talked about Deandre Hopkins yet. So, D-Hop, well, let's just hang on here and see who my next pick will be. We got time. So, essentially what happened is the NFL put in a new policy, a new rule, that a team or teams can be forced to forfeit games in the event that they don't have the requisite players at a position group or just their overall roster to play a game due to COVID. So basically, what this is being perceived as is the NFL is saying, I'm going to keep my clock up here so I don't get auto-picked again, so I keep an eye on that. What the NFL is basically telling their players, their staff, all the people involved, the coaches, the GMs, everyone, is that you have to get vaccinated without really telling them you have to get vaccinated. It's like that TikTok, tell me you're blank without really telling me you're blank. A lot of players don't like that. A lot of players are becoming more and more independent. They're becoming more and more self-advocators, and they aren't just letting them boss these guys around anymore. So D-Hop sends out this tweet and is like, yeah, the NFL making me choose my stance on the COVID vaccine without allowing me to make that choice when I'm still unsure is really making me reassess my career as an NFL player. What? DeAndre? You can't just walk out on the fantasy community weeks before the season, weeks before draft season. What about Kyler? What about making Bill O'Brien look dumb? Come on, man. I mean, I totally get where he's coming from, and we're not going to get into are we pro-vaccine or whatever on the channel. None of that stuff is going to go on here, but at the end of the day, D-Hop can make his choice. He deleted the tweet, which makes me say that he was overreacting to the situation from his stance, didn't like the PR it was giving him, so he just got rid of it. That's fine. They'll be forgotten about in a couple weeks, I would assume, unless more people follow in his footsteps, of course. But, risk. Is it news or is it noise? I'm going to say it's noise for now for fantasy football, but I think that it's something to keep our eyes on here as the season approaches. So, boom, John Brown. We are not getting auto-picked here in the 13th round. We've got 2 picks left to make. We've already got some defenses being sprinkled into the conversation. We only have 1 quarterback still. Peeking on that running back crop. So, yeah, that's the scoop on DeAndre Hopkins. And then back to the whole Michael Thomas thing one last time, and I promise we'll wrap up the Michael Thomas talk here. I expect his ADP will fall into the mid-4th round. That's essentially what we did with the Cam Akers story. We made a short story long. Yeah, I mean, his ADP is going to slip if we learn for a fact he's missing games prior to the start of draft season, or the finish of draft season, rather. So Michael Thomas, I'd say, just like Saquon Barkley, it becomes more and more valuable, because the thing that makes me feel good about this is that it isn't a new injury. It's the same thing we saw causing him issues last year that he just happened to have surgery on in June. So it makes me feel better to know this isn't something new. I would really be slapping the injury-prone tag on him right now if it was a new ankle injury. But since he's recovering from his 2020 injuries to approach the 2021 year, I'm fine with it. He can still be Michael Thomas when he comes back. And again, like Saquon, if he's going to be pushed down the draft board and give us more value as players picking, like myself, I would love some more value down here. We've been getting sniped all day long. We need more players like that on the bottom ends of our draft boards. Yeah, let him fall back, and I'll certainly be taking advantage of that draft capital if he falls back to me. So 30 seconds, tick-tock, tick-tock. We're on the clock here. I would not mind at all taking... We're going to do it. We're going to take Tevin Coleman here. Give me a running back. This team needs another running back. He's currently listed as the starter for the Jets. Again, I said earlier in the video, Michael Carter, probably a player who eventually, sooner rather than later, takes over that job. I've also talked about Tevin Coleman being a must-own running back. Why might he must be a must-own running back, Evan? Well, Tevin Coleman's trade bait. It's that simple. Give me a player who's going to start the first couple weeks of his season, maybe has a couple strong performances, sell him for more than he's worth. Make a trade. Find someone that'll help you later down the stretch of the season when you project Coleman not to be the starter in the lineup anymore, and they don't thoroughly think through that process. Boom. You've just upgraded yourself at the running back position. Congratulations. So maybe I have to toss another piece in there. Maybe I toss together a Kareem Hunt and Tevin Coleman package and come out with an RB1, a fringe RB1, and a player that can come out and win a league for you. So these are all the thought processes that need to go into making your draft day decisions. Obviously, a lot of stuff to think about. We've talked about a ton today. Again, we've been scattered all over the map with how we've been choosing our players here and talking about fantasy content. One thing I do want to mention, though, while I've seen his name here, Adam Troutman, the Saints tight end, he's going into his second season here. He was a third-round pick, I believe, for them in 2020. Might be a really good sleeper candidate here. You might not have to pick him until your last pick on the board. I mean, we're going into the 15th round in a 12-team league, and virtually every team on the board left needs to take a fantasy defense. If you want to sneak in here, take Adam Troutman. Maybe you pick him up off the waiver wires if you don't end up drafting him, but then move on from your tight end. Sean Payton loves throwing into the tight end position. We've seen it with Jimmy Graham. We saw it for a while with Colby Fleener, even though he was kind of disappointing. This is like 5 years ago now. We've seen it with, Benjamin Watson. Like, the guys in there just score. Jared Cook. So maybe he won't be elite right off the bat, but I do think you'll see some involvement, some usage. And when Michael Thomas isn't on the field, they've got to throw the ball to somebody. It's that simple. You've got Alvin Kamara, Traquan Smith, and what else? You lost Emmanuel Sanders to free agency. You lost Michael Thomas for a couple weeks at least to injury. Someone's got to produce for you. So there's my quick 2 cents on a sleeper tight end for you. Adam Troutman, do not forget the name this year. He could be a big-time player for us. Let's take a peek at these defenses one more time. Pittsburgh is probably at the top of the board with San Francisco. The Colts would be a team I'd love to snatch up here. I think that the Browns should have a good pass rush, and their secondary is much improved from last year. So as we wind down the picks here, it looks like there's going to be a lot of opportunity to make some good choices here. And there goes Jared Cook, the Los Angeles Chargers tight end now. There goes my Steelers defense here. We've got some teams on auto pick as we will wrap things up here we're recording this video on a Friday night here. It'll go up obviously first thing in the morning for you guys to take advantage of. It's been kind of a wild mock draft. Started things off in a frenzy, trying to figure out how I was going to adjust to the running backs being taken on the board here. Next week, I'm not sure exactly how the video lineup is going to look. Obviously, we'll have Mock Draft Monday. So again, one more plug to the Discord. Absolutely free. Please go check that out. You can get involved in these community mock drafts, mock draft against the other members of the community, myself. It'll be featured here in videos on the channel, and I break down the picks and the players on the board here as we go. And obviously, you've seen that to this point if you're still watching today's video. So please, if you're new around here, click that link. I want to get 100 people in there before the NFL season even starts. And, every day we're getting a couple more here and there, closing in on that halfway marker, and we've got a whole month left to go. So join that community Discord up. Again, I do fantasy advice in there and stuff. I do dynasty roster audits where I take a peek at your roster if you just send me a screenshot of your team, and I give you a position-by-position breakdown or just a quick overview depending on what you're looking for of your team's roster and how I see it looking. So there's a lot of stuff to take advantage of there. We also will just be talking sports and football in that chat, talking about news, rumors, any updates we've got. So great stuff, really fun time for us all to be taking advantage of in there. So there's still a lot of defenses I like here. So top off today's video as our bench unit is full. Again, we only have the 16th round in here because Cam Akers, we did not want to goof everything up and get him picked. Obviously, then we were to be so focused on drafting the running back position that we forgot that Cam Akers' handcuff was on the table. But it's all right. We scooped him up in the 8th round, so that worked out fine for us. Again, if you're just skipping around today's video, checking out how the board looks, that Darrell Henderson range where I think that he should be properly valued is right around RB 18 to RB 19. Essentially, the way my rankings are broken down is slide Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Josh Jacobs back, and David Montgomery and Chris Carson forward, and actually toss Miles Sanders into that group as well. I think his upside is just higher. But yeah, move these two players back. I'm not a big fan of their ceilings. And then get Carson, Montgomery, and potentially Sanders. We'll see. I'm updating my rankings on the SFS draft guide here in a week or so. Obviously, I've got big things to do with that regarding the Cam Akers injury, and I just filled out Darrell Henderson's draft profile as the handcuff and the next man up for that team. But I do need to just, wipe the slate clean, start that ranking sheet over. And, we've had news and stuff. I'll probably make that a once or twice a week event now where I update that list because it's such an important detail for you guys to have advantage to be utilizing this fantasy season when you're approaching that draft day. And then we'll ultimately turn that into a PDF-style draft cheat sheet where I will have tier by tier broken down rankings and such. And then if you're on the computer, you can print that off. Obviously, it's the point for it being a PDF. If you're on the computer, you'll be able to click on each individual player, check out their individual player profile where I break down their instant grades for their ceilings, their floor, and then I do a thing called the risk radar where I give them a grade out of 10, 1 being the lowest risk possible. Obviously, you could go to 0, but it starts at 1. And goes to 10 being the highest risk. We have it go from obviously a green to yellow to red scale. And that's a little bit more relative. It depends based off of your average draft position. So your ADP, if it's too high or too low, how risky does that make you in turn? And then obviously your fantasy situation plays a huge factor into that. We did situational and talent analysis for the rookie class of 2021 in the Dynasty Draft Guide. So if you want to see more content geared that way, that we only have profiles for the rookie class of, but we're doing player profiles for our top 250 redraft players. We just didn't have the time to do dynasty profiles this season. It's such a time-consuming task to do, and we would rather not do a terrible job on all of them, and we'd rather just focus in on doing a good job for those redraft guides. So that's what we've got for you guys to take advantage of this season. Another option I'm currently exploring for next year. Well, we'll leave that to be a surprise. We're still not even out of the 2021 season. Don't want to look too far into the future. So, yes, for the 2021 season, that's what we've got. We've got a bunch of other stuff in that draft guide kit as well. You can check that out at sizzlefantasy.com. The link to that is in the description. And as Jokester's clock winds out here, it seems as if I may finally be able to pick my defense that we've been waiting probably 5 minutes for here now. But that's all right. It's been a great video today. Although it wasn't a perfect and a flawless mock draft, I think there's a lot to be taken away from this, a lot to be learned. I think there's a lot of chances for us to become better fantasy players from, even myself. I've never advocated for going with an RB0 strategy, and that's dang near what today's video turned into. So I learned something new. I learned I hate the RB0 strategy even more than I thought I did, and I really disapproved of it a lot. So Take my word for it. Don't suffer the consequences of it yourself. So we're going to be able to take that defense here in just a second and then wrap this thing up, and I'll see you all in the outro. Either getting the Ravens or the Colts here. I would assume that one of those two options would be on the table for me. And we'll see here if... oh, Trisk just left the lobby, so there he is. He's back. We'll see what he ends up picking here. There he goes, Anthony Firkser. So there you have it. That'll do for today's video. We'll take that Colts defense off the board. I'm going Colts over Ravens because I like DeForest Buckner and those big boys and that front seven. They also give up minimal yardage and don't let the big play up to the other team. So there you have it. We'll see you in the outro and finish off today's video. All right, that was a wild episode of our Saturday mock draft series. Join me back again on Monday for Mock Draft Monday. But again, to be involved in that and to actually be featured in the video and drafting with me live, you're going to have to be able to go down, join that community Discord, and that's how you'll get hooked up with the link to join that. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed this week's lineup of fantasy content on the channel and took something away from each of the videos. So thank you so much again. I'll see you guys all next time. Peace out.